It's the JJYP podcast.
Shawn Cole. Dude, you're making history. I know that it may not be a great history. Maybe it won't be history at all. But you're like one of the first. You're like one of the first guests.
I'm thrilled to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time.
And the accommodations, man, this is way nicer than when I did Conan.
Well, Conan's on a budget. Nice spare at no expense. So what's going on with you, man?
You know, it's been a crazy year, and so I'm really just trying to kind of be reflective of where I've been and what I want to do in the future. So I feel like I'm kind of at a transition point. So I moved down here a year ago, as you know. So embracing life in Kansas, and got some things going musically that I'm excited about.
And where were you before Kansas?
I lived in Firth, Nebraska for 8 years.
That, I mean, is that from I've obviously never lived in Nebraska, but from Nebraska to Kansas, is that a big switch up, or?
Not really. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's not. For me, I was living in the country, so just to be back around more people in a town is a little different. And a lot of my work was in that part of Nebraska, so I drive a little farther. But I've been a full-time musician, starting my 15th year of being a full-time musician, January 1st.
That's freaking awesome. And on top of that, you handle bookings for other people, right?
Yeah, that's a little side hustle, I guess you would call it. So that kind of came naturally because I had so many gigs coming to me and my band that we were saying no to a lot of gigs. So then I found a way to kind of give those gigs to some friends of mine. So that's been a nice, easy side hustle, I guess, if you will. But mainly, as a musician, I make 95% of my money performing, which usually as a musician you hope to do it through record sales or this or that. But for me, it's been performing, and I love to perform, so it's not a bad thing. I'm thrilled to be doing it at any level, and the fact that I've been able to make a living at it, I feel pretty blessed.
Well, I've been obviously fortunate enough to see a couple of your performances, and you look like you're having a blast up there.
We're going to talk to security about that too. Just the way you just got on in there.
Look, I like to make an entrance wherever I go. No, but you really do. Like, you guys, you have a great sound. Your ability to be a one-man show, like when you don't have the other help that comes in and you're doing the drums. So at any given time, how many instruments do you end up playing at the same time?
Typically drums, guitar, harmonica, and you're singing. And singing.
I dabble a little bit in the music arena, and I don't know how. It's hard enough for me to play and sing at the same time. How you keep track of everything else, and then the percussion and how does your brain separate all of that?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. Yeah, I think what really helped me the most is I started off as a drummer. I mean, my first passion musically was playing the drums. And when you play the drums, you learn how to separate your limbs and do different things with your limbs. And then even like switch up the rhythms so they're doing something that's not really natural. And you just have to do it enough that you get that limb independence. It's the same with somebody strumming a guitar or playing a piano and then being able to sing at the same time. That's not usually natural. It takes a while to do that. Then once you get that, you get those two limbs, if you will, separated. So with drums, I've just had to, with drumming kind of introduced me to that concept. And so I've been able to separate my limbs a little. So when you started, you didn't start out doing the whole thing. No, I started. You evolved to that, but you've been doing it for how long? 15 years full time, or 14 years full time. But I've been playing music since I was 10. Now. That's freaking hilarious.
No, but I know you've heard me say this before, but the first time I saw you, because I didn't know what to expect. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, Shawn's a musician. He's got this band, The Drunken Monkey. Or is it the Drunken Monkeys?
Drunk Monkey.
Oh, I screwed it up big time. Drunk Monkey. That's it. Okay. And how long have you been under that label then?
Gosh, I suck at chronology. I'm guessing we've been called Drunk Monkey for around 10 years. And there's a great story there too. It's turned out to be a great band name because people, even if they don't know the band, they'll see a Drunk Monkey shirt and say, "Hey, I'll buy that," just to be. They like the phrase. But my dear friend Bongo Charlie Parton, he suggested that as a band name because he liked it. But he's a Buddhist, and it's a concept used in a lot of Buddhist teachings, where they describe your thoughts that are just your subconscious thoughts that are just going all day long. They refer to that as the drunk monkey, and so many of the teachings are about silencing that drunk monkey to live in the moment. So I like the concept of that, and like the name.
Yeah, no, the name is, well, it's you remember it. It's not something you easily forget. And then
Drunken Monkeys.
On top of that, yeah, the drunken monkeys. No, but the first time I saw you, it reminded me of Mary Poppins when Dick Van Dyke in that beginning scene is playing all of those instruments and everything. Like, I've never seen that before in real life. So to see you do that, I chuckled, but at the same time, and just knowing how to play a little bit myself, I'm like, man, that takes an enormous amount of concentration to do all of that. And so I've always wanted to ask how you keep that beat and tempo together, having to keep all of that and then manage everything at a time. And I mean, are you nervous when you go out there, or is that completely gone now?
For the most part, it's gone. I wish I had shows that made me more nervous, and every now and then maybe someone will be in the audience, or if it's a bigger show, then I'll still get some nerves. And I really like that. I think I've done it so often that I rarely get nervous like that, and I kind of miss that.
Wow, that's crazy. So it's just another show. So where do you derive your endorphin burst for it then? Is it the energy of the crowd, or?
That part's always been kind of the magic to me, is that typically when I'm playing music, I've always just gotten really excited when I do it. And sometimes it was detrimental. When I was a young drummer, I would get too excited and kind of stiffen up, and my tempos would go too fast, and I wouldn't be able to. You can't play as well when you're tense, but I would always have this excitement playing. And still to this day, I get excited playing, and that usually just translates to the audience that I'm having a good time, and hopefully it lures them in. And definitely the audience factor, that's like the magnifying magic thing, that if it's there and they're giving you energy back, then boom, they're going to get a much better show, because it just creates a circle of giving this energy back and forth to each other.
How long does it take for you to establish what kind of crowd you're going to have for that night?
Well, I don't think the musician gets to establish that as much as the crowd, and you really never know. I mean, sometimes it could change with a new table coming in. I always have a theory that whoever's sitting in the front tables can kind of block a lot of energy from going beyond them. So, I mean, if the people are at the front tables are just talking to themselves and not at all into what you're doing, it makes it a lot harder to connect with the back of the room. Adversely, if you get someone at the front table that's just having a ton of fun with you and engaged in it, boom, it's just like they just take whatever you're doing, you give it to them, and they just kind of pass it out to the people behind them.
Do you have an established set, or do you just roll with it?
Just roll with it. I have a bunch of set lists, but I never follow them.
Is there a particular song that always rocks the house, no matter where you go? It seems to always be a good go-to.
There's some towards the end of the night that people are going to respond to, like "Blister in the Sun" by the Violent Femmes. There's several that get them up. Now, I don't think you could do that song first song of the night and get the same response. So they're almost like tools in your tool belt that you don't pull out until you know it's time to.
And have you ran into those nights where you're like, man, I got to do something to liven this crowd up.
Yeah, and I'm often guilty of not doing that enough because it's
Well, yeah, I mean, could you handle one more thing?
it's like yeah, and that's selfish, I guess, or maybe it's lazy of me, but
lazy with all you've got going, like
that's the thing. Usually after each song, some guys are really great at talking to the crowd and verbally kind of getting them on this mission with them. And usually after every song, I'm reaching for a sip of something and just trying to catch my breath so that I could play the next song. I forget what your question was, but
no, it's okay. The other question I asked, you do a warm up. How do you maintain your voice and keep from losing your voice?
I have certain songs that I like to start off with.
To kind of warm you up.
Yeah, that are kind of easier to sing and just and they'll kind of also serve as letting me know what my voice is going to be able to do that night. But typically I rest a lot between the shows. So during the summer, if I have 4 shows in a row, especially between the third and fourth show, I'm resting. I'm not talking a lot between the shows, and I'm drinking 6 to 10 quarts of water or Gatorade between every show, just to get hydrated. But it seems that hydration seems to be the main thing for me.
Most important.
I smoke less cigars now than I used to.
And you don't drink alcohol before you go up. You don't. Well, obviously you don't. You said you didn't have any butterflies in your stomach earlier in your career. How did you handle the?
I drown the butterflies in the alcohol. I go out with a net and collect them, and everything. That's so beautiful, and then I just drown them in a Jim Beam bottle.
No, I remember hearing something. I think it was Tim McGraw that for the longest time he said, "Man, I never went on stage without being able to take a couple of shots to loosen me up." Because even to this day, he says he still gets those butterflies in his stomach when he goes on stage.
And sometimes for me, it's not like a nervous thing, but there is like a anxiousness, or just you're setting up all this gear and you're kind of worrying about all the logistics and the technical aspects of what you're doing. And so yeah, I enjoy drinking when I play, and sometimes just the right amount of beverage, it definitely seems to help the music flow. But I have friends that play brilliantly that don't drink at all, so I know that could be done too. But my band, we definitely enjoy some libations.
All right, and I'm not trying to embarrass you, but do you have? What was the worst show, or what's your worst experience that you remember in this journey where you were like, "Oh my, that was just terrible," or have you even had that?
Oh yeah, I've had a lot of that.
Have you?
I've had a few anyway, more than a few. I suppose the worst, and I hope I say the town right. I think it was Burr, Nebraska, and this was early on when I was playing in a traveling country band, and I was 19, 20 years old, maybe 21. And we had just collectively pulled together and spent like $25,000 on a new PA system. So we all have debt for the first time, and we go to the street dance, and it's kind of spitting down rain at times, and it would stop. So we'd play, then it'd start raining, we'd have to stop. And then somebody showed us the forecast. It was just definitely going to rain. So we were up there playing as long as we could. And then eventually we just had to make the decision to stop the show. And the crowd just was belligerent and hateful. I mean, they were throwing full cans of beer at us.
Oh my gosh.
Standing on our vehicles, like urinating on our vehicles and stuff.
Oh my.
And there was a cop in the town, and we were like, "Hey, come on, man, help us out with this." And he's like, "Well, I don't see anything." And so it was just this horrible, you felt like you were in like a really shitty movie. And then it got worse. So by then this time, it's pouring down rain as we're leaving in our vehicles. So our lead singer, Kenny, at the time was, he had this old Bronco, I think, or an old Jeep. He's driving with our trailer full of all of our $20,000 worth of gear. And we're going down this, I think it was a gravel road at the time. And it's pouring down rain, and his Jeep just starts bouncing from left to right. Well, people in the crowd had taken off all the lug nuts off of one of his wheels.
Oh my gosh.
So it was just like, oh my gosh, these people could have killed us.
Holy cow.
And it was just like, all because
I thought I was going to get something way less than that.
Yeah, so it was
like people have tried to kill you.
Well, it was.
I mean, yeah. I mean, what would have happened had you guys, been on a main highway or something, and then those things came off?
Yeah. So it was.
Holy cow!
It was crazy, and there were other dynamics that I was unaware of at the time. Like we were playing in a town, and our singer at the time was in high school, had been a football player. He was out of high school for a few years, but there was like a football rivalry between the two towns, and blah blah blah. So some of these guys, macho guys with shit to prove, and. So, I mean, sure enough, the story continues. Like a month later, we're back at some other town. A lot of these guys are there. And a lot of Kenny's friends that I don't even know beat the hell out of these guys that did that shit to us. And I was just...
Oh, my gosh.
Me and the other guys from Indiana, we were just like, what the hell is happening? This is just... It seemed impossible that stuff like that would happen or could happen.
Holy cow. That is just gnarly. And is that... But that hasn't been like a common occurrence.
No, that was incredibly rare. So, there's been a few nights where you see really some ugliness. But for the most part, that's why I think, my job so much. And that's why I love performing. And specifically, I love performing in the small towns where a lot of great musicians that I know have no interest in playing in small town USA. They want to just play in the cities where they could have their following and that support. And I enjoy going to small towns because time and time again, I see way more exhibits of what's right with our country and what's right with people than I do with what's wrong. So a lot of people, you're sitting home on social media or watching TV, and it's like, it's a shit show. Our country's got some serious issues. I'm aware of that, but I get out and I just see people, for the most part, being good. We had talked at a different time about how unpretentious bars can be. You get some drinks in people and you kind of see...
Man, right?
Yeah, you see what they're feeling. So overall, I'm amazed at how generous and good people are.
So, obviously, overall, it's been a good experience, or you wouldn't have done it for so long. But was there ever a stint, maybe in the beginning or towards the middle, that made you ever question what you were doing? Did you ever be like, man, I don't want to do this anymore? Or has the majority been, this is an awesome ride? I
think a lot of musicians, and I know this is true for myself, a lot of times my perception of what is going on with my career is based on the last gig I had. And that sounds so shallow and nearsighted, but it's like, I had a horrible gig. This is obviously not working. I should get a job. I should, so there have been times, where it got more exhausting and just where I had to kind of refocus and say, okay, why am I doing this? And what do I want to accomplish with this? The thing that's helped the most is for years it was just a one-man show. And now I rarely play a solo show. I've got great musicians that are some of my best friends around me. And it's just like a family. We go out and cool. We have fun, and they keep me younger and just keep my mood lighter, which I really know people for that.
And you've got this, I don't know, you have a pretty calm persona about you as well. But I've noticed the people that you surround yourself are a lot like-minded as you are. Like, how with some people, they're like, hey, I want you to meet my friend, and you meet the friend, and you're like, dude, this guy's a douche, and it just doesn't collab. But all of the people, and it's not like I've hung out extensively with your circle, but the people that I have met, instantly I'm like, dude, these are just awesome people with amazing talent.
I agree. I feel so blessed. I know they're happy because they're getting to play music as much as they have wanted to play music. And it's, but on the flip side of that, I feel like they're making my dream better than it was when I was just playing by myself, because my goal, when I was young was maybe to be famous or sell this many albums and now my goal has really been just to be able to do it full time, but then bring as much music to as many people that don't usually get music, live performances as I can. And I'm just shocked that these guys travel as much as they do with me. A lot of them have to work Monday through Friday, and they'll just show up and they always come ready and they throw it down. And So I feel grateful for the people that I got playing around me, for sure.
Are you still, obviously you write a lot of your own stuff as well. I've always been curious about your creative process. How does for you a song come to fruition? Do you start with the music? Do you start with the lyrics? Like, what normally sparks that intuition for you to be creative and come up with something that you're happy with?
You know, it's changed a little bit in this last year. It used typically, most of the songs I'd write, I would be writing lyrics, but as I was writing those lyrics, I was usually singing them attached to some kind of a melody, and then I would basically just kind of slap chords or position chords under that made it fit, and then turn that into that would kind of therefore be the song, because you'd have the lyrics, the melody, and the chordal structure. This last year I've started writing songs with a friend of mine, and he tends to write the music first, and that's allowed me just to put lyrics on his stuff and kind of arrange his parts. So I feel like I'm changing how I write a bit. Today I wrote a poem that I'm hoping will turn into a song without any melody attached, and that, as I was doing that, I felt that was odd for me. So,
how many? If you could just ballpark it, I'm not looking for an exact number, but how many songs do you think throughout your career you've written?
Probably 400 or 500, but a lot of them are total shit. And what's strange, anyone that's listening to this that sees my shows, I've gotten away from playing very many of my originals at my shows. Typically, when I did write songs, they were more folk-based, folk songs, and they really didn't match the intensity of my show. Plus, my band never rehearses, so I think I've been more comfortable covering a song with my band live on the spot, but I've kind of gotten away from performing my originals during our rock show.
And that the fact that you guys don't practice, that is where you lose me, because I don't think I could ever sit down, and I'm not this great keyboardist, but the fact that you guys just get together and find out what chord you're in, and then you guys just go off, that to me is magic. That's magical right there, because
it feels magical. And I'm lucky. I wouldn't be nearly as good at doing that in somebody else's band as the guys I have are at doing that when they follow me. I'm usually the guy that throws down the song and they embellish it in all these different ways. But I think the general attitude in our band is you've practiced for years to be able to get to the point on an instrument where you can just play. So there's a difference between practice and rehearsal. So all my guys, I'm sure, practice a lot, but we don't rehearse typically as a group. And we might send out an email and say, hey, we're going to try to do this song in this key, be prepared. And hopefully we'll figure it out in a time or two.
Is there a specific genre or band that you emulate most? Where do you draw your inspiration from that way, or do you even listen to a lot of music?
I don't listen to a whole lot of music. I go in spurts where I'll get on Spotify and dive in deep into some people. But yeah, we don't really try to emulate anybody. It's just kind of the way it comes out. And I think our limited instrumentation, having a drum, my feet as the drummer, that could just do it. So it's limited things. It kind of gives us a unique sound because it creates a lot of space in the rhythm area. But aside, I don't like just talking about myself. I got to tell you, when I first moved down here, I was had left a relationship and I just didn't know much in this town. I kept hearing about this guy named Josh. He's like, yeah, Josh has got a little recording studio. And Josh
bastard
plays keyboards, and I kept thinking, when am I going to meet this Josh guy? And it's been a treat, man. And I love the compositions you've done. I mean, you spent some serious hours on them, layers and layers. And I've been impressed with your compositions. And then when I finally heard you sing, it's like, holy cow, man, you've got a great vocalist voice. Like, your range is way better than mine will ever be. And It's nice to get to know you.
You have to say that. You have to say that, and that's fine.
I didn't tell Conan
I
that.
have a large following, and I think there's 3 people that are going to hear this podcast.
Well, they've stopped listening by now.
Yeah, probably. No, that's why I have people like you on. See, no one wants to just listen to me for however long it is. So it's all about the people. That has been one of the very unique things that I haven't traveled due to performing, but I have gotten around, very fortunate from a young age. I've gotten to do a lot of traveling. And one of my most favorite things about that is the people that you run into from different walks of life that I just think if I, stayed within the confines of my state, because I was born and raised in Salt Lake, Utah, and that people, unless you live there, you don't understand, but there is a definite bubble there. And you really do get caught up in thinking life is a certain way. And maybe it's that way for everybody, I don't know. But for my experience, a lot of people don't even know the different demographics that are out there because they just stay in that one area. And it has been very fortunate for me to go and put myself in kind of an uncomfortable situation with me and my family. But what is derived out of that, this town is kind of like a black hole in of itself. And I've just met the coolest people, like that I know that I'll at least think about for the rest of my life.
It's a fascinating town. The other day you'd brought up doing like a sitcom of this town or like a TV show, and it made me think of Northern Exposure, that show about this little town in Alaska years ago, because it is like that. And then the town, it just fluctuates so much between the busy season and the off season, and even just between the midweek and the weekend. It's a interesting town, but yeah, there's some big time characters that live here.
I don't think we can't say it. I don't think it would be a problem, but the Tropics, which is the local favorite bar. Well, it's the only bar.
It's my favorite too.
Leave it down right. We're shop at the same store. Okay, so for people that have never been to Milford, this town doesn't even have a light. This is a very, very small community. And I've never been a part of a small community like this. And I'm trying to become more involved. I like to bloom where I'm planted and help out where I can. But it has been kind of an interesting change, seeing how, like, it's not like you can just, where I lived in Utah.
How big is Salt Lake City?
Salt Lake isn't huge. I would compare it kind of how it is to Denver. Denver reminds me a lot of Salt Lake City. Obviously, Denver's it's huge, but that I would compare Denver and Salt Lake really close. You probably know of Denver,
Sure,
more, but it's a beautiful state. It's very different. 100 miles in any different direction will derive different scenery. Like you're on a whole different planet. It's crazy that way.
I've driven through just a little corner of it, I believe, and it was beautiful, but I've just scratched a little surface. But yeah, this town is so strange because if you were to drive through it, which you'd have to get off the highway to do, but
you have to go out of your way.
and you see what, maybe 100 houses,
Yeah.
if that. But then you realize that most of those houses are just owned by people that vacation here during the summer, and so it's even living here, it's like I have no idea how many people actually live here. I'm always surprised when I see a school with kids coming out of it.
Right.
It's like, oh, there's kids that are getting an education here. And
Well, I remember when I first moved here, it hadn't even occurred to me. I'm like, where do we get our mail? Where is that all? Because no one has a mailbox out here.
Yeah.
I think except for the new development that they have, but everyone else has to go to that little post office, and they have their own little box.
I should hang out there more. That's where I need to meet some people other than the fine people that hang out the tropics with me. I should go to the post office more often, because that's the only time.
But you travel a lot. Have you ever ran into a situation that's quite like the tropics?
There's a little town that has my favorite bar, and I've played in lots of bars, but little town of Steel City, Nebraska. and it's very similar in the fact that they have a little post office, and it's tiny even compared to Milford's. And I think the only business in town is this bar, and it's a town. I think that Signs has 84 people. Last I heard, it's like 54 that live there.
Holy cow, that's even smaller than here.
So even smaller than here, but the bar is thriving. The bar has amazing food, and people kind of know that it's the place you can go out of your town. You know, people behave differently when they're in a different town. It's just the facts of it. You know, they cut loose a little more if they're not just next to their neighbors. So people go down to this bar in Steel City, and it creates this fun outlaw kind of attitude and atmosphere. So that's my favorite bar. But that town does remind me of this one in the fact that if you're a local, that means something. I mean, if you're one of the people that live there, you know this whole other dynamic that exists that the people just coming in to get their dinner and have some drinks don't understand.
Well, and for me, in the situation I grew up in, I never went to the bar. My first cutting my teeth on the bar scene is when I used to travel in the medical field. In Vegas, they had a lot of piano dueling bars, and I started going to bars because of that. But in the group I grew up with, you just didn't go to a bar. That was a bad condemnation.
Yeah.
You stayed away from that. And it's
what
funny.
Percentage I don't even know if you would know this, but I realize there's a lot of Mormons in Utah. So in Salt Lake City, is it a dry? I know some of the counties out there are dry, correct? Or some of the cities?
Yeah, it's the demographics changed quite a bit. There's an influx of outside influence moving in right now with the situation in California, and they're trying to kind of make that new Silicon Valley out there in a town called Draper, and that has changed well, and not only Draper but St. George, and it has just made that state that, like, the housing market over there is absolutely ridiculous. It is like, I'm not kidding you, like a tough shed's like $400,000. It's like, how much do you want for that house? That's crazy.
That is insane.
That was one of the driving aspects of coming out here, is from a financial portfolio. It's like, man, I could literally save like not just $1,000 or $2,000, like thousands of dollars coming here and chilling for a little while versus being caught up in that market. And then, of course, being afraid that it's going to drop, because that's what happened to us in 2008.
Right.
And Utah didn't get hit as bad as some of the other places. I remember driving through complete neighborhoods in like Vegas that were vacant because everyone had lost their shorts.
I saw that was the movie they made after the fact that really explained the financial housing.
The Big Short.
The Big Short.
Big Short.
That was brilliant. Yeah, and it was amazing because it was so factual, but it really educated people on what was happening, and it was, yeah, you'd see they'd show you just neighborhoods where that's all it was. These people that had no business owning these homes. Yeah, well, this should be a safe place for that. But I'm sure glad you're here just as a friend, man. It has definitely been I don't think this is going to be a resting place forever. But I always want to have at least a footprint here, because it has been a community that has changed me in just the sense that, well, you know, growing up in Utah, it's funny. There are a lot of aspects I don't like, but there are a lot of aspects that are amazing that are controlled by the faith. And to answer your original question, I think the demographic, it's gone way down. As far as how many Mormons are, it's still obviously the dominant faith, but Salt Lake City is far more liberal. I mean, I think the mayor the last several times has been Democratic. So it's definitely a lot more liberal in the Salt Lake Sugar House area. But then as you move out in the outskirts, that's what makes that state red predominantly every single time. And then Mitt Romney being the Mormon, that's kind of a shoo-in. You just know what's going to happen. I feel like it was the same with Mitt Romney. Yeah.
Getting to be the governor there. it was just like, well, yeah, everyone kind of knew he was going to win. That part's kind of annoying, but because they let the faith dictate more of the person that you're really electing. So sometimes I feel like that's kind of a smoke screen, but the church is different when you get out of the state too. I remember the first time I went to a church outside of the state of Utah, and obviously the principles were the same, but the attitudes and the demographic of the people, they were just so much more or less judgmental and more accepting of the normal things that happen in life. Like that was one of the biggest shell shocks coming here, is how much people drank out here. It is a sport, all of it in its own. Like that experience has been interesting, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You and I have talked about it before. I think there's you gotta have your checks and balances and make sure you're not crossing lines. But man, it is a predominant thing out here. Like that's the thing everyone wants to do at the end of the day, is go hang out at the bar and drink. And
I've had, with my agency, I have musicians contact me from other parts of the country, and one thing I tell them is like, I feel lucky that I ended up here in the Midwest, because there's so many of these little towns, and most of them, they used to have, it's what's crazy is some little towns like this used to have 4 or 5 bars. I play in towns this size that had 4 or 5 bars, maybe 6 or 7 liquor licenses, including liquor stores and gas stations that sold booze. That's changed a lot, but there's still usually one good bar in most of these towns in the Midwest, and most of those will pay a guy like me to come in, and that's just doesn't exist in every other part of the country. So I realize that part of my success has been, I'm here with all these German and Czech descendants that still they drink like it's a sport.
Jeez, no kidding.
If their college team's not going to win, but there you are. They're gonna show up and play.
Absolutely. So. But the thing that I have loved also is there are people that come and go, and there's people that stop in and pass through. But then there's the regular crowd that I've gotten to know, and those people are just freaking amazing. It just, like, we all have our quirks and our shortcomings. I don't think in any aspect of your life anything's ever going to be perfect, and I think we've somehow in some ways been tricked that there is a perfect place,
perfect
or
image,
and there isn't. I think there's always a yin to the yang. Yep. And I've always tried not to look through rosy glasses. Obviously, when people show you who they are, believe them. But at the same time, to kind of approach everything with an open mind and open arms, and just kind of embrace their way of life and kind of see where that's coming from. And there have been obviously definitive things that I'm like, this is why I don't do this. But at the other side, some of these people have been the nicest, most genuine people I've ever met. They just wear their heart on their sleeve. They don't.
That's it. If there is a negative side to their personality per se, or something that most people would consider a flaw, they don't spend time trying to hide. They don't have that pretentious thing of like, I want to present just this image to people. They're very, this is who I am, and the good and all the people I've met around here far outweighs the bad.
Oh, for sure.
But I like that they don't, they'll kind of joke about, oh yeah, so-and-so is blah, 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 blah. And it's like, and that person's like, yeah, what are you going to do about it?
It's a free for all.
It's beautiful.
It is a free for all for everyone, and no one is exempt from that. I think if you're not being made fun of, that's when you really do have to worry. That's when you know that there's some serious shit going down.
Yeah.
But no, it is like everyone slings mud, and it's all unjust, and it's funny, but it is just that same demographic that shows up night after night. And there is that part of it that's intoxicating, because those people really do grow on you, and before long you're like, man, I really do like this little,
I care about these people.
Yeah, this little side piece, and you want to become more involved. They asked me this year to be Santa Claus for the city.
I wish I could have come to see that.
I wanted you to sit on my lap. I'll be honest with you. I was looking forward to wondering what you wanted for Christmas. But at first, I kind of didn't know how it was going to go, and I'm throwing this thing together at the last minute, and one of my people I've become really good friends with, Kelsey. Jessica, my wife, was with my kids at a recital, and so I didn't have anyone to help me with this makeup, and I'm just trying to throw it because you don't want to screw it up.
Yeah, you don't want to look.
You don't want to.
You don't want a 5-year-old saying this guy's a phony.
Exactly. Oh, that's that new guy that moved into town. We need to run him out immediately. This is the worst Santa ever. But it was really cool to see the community come together. I only had one other experience where they did a community thing, and that's when they had the movie that they did for everyone. And the community really did show up, and it was cool to be a part of that. And at the end of the night, I was like, man, that was a cool experience, and it was cool to see the families and how many.
Now, did your kids know you were going to dress as Santa?
No.
And do your kids see you as Santa Claus?
No, they haven't. Okay. So every year, my wife.
Did you tell them afterwards that you had done this?
Oh no, I don't think the kids. I think Jess knew. So my oldest is 4, youngest is 2.
Okay, I see.
So it was kind of like I don't think it would have been.
They look much older than that. I thought they were like 12 and 14.
No.
The one has a mustache.
Yeah, has a beard. Well, that's a hormonal issue that we're working with.
Sorry I brought that up.
No. I thank God every day that they look like their mom, because I'm glad that the girls didn't look like me. I wouldn't want them to be.
You have a beautiful family.
But I'll be honest with you, before I had kids, that was one of the things I was worried about, is having ugly kids. I'm serious. I'm a big Seinfeld. I love Seinfeld. And there's an episode on there where their friends want them to meet this baby, and the baby's just ugly. It's so ugly. And the reactions from all of them are hilarious. And it was a thing. I was like, man, how am I going to deal with that, having ugly kids? No, I'm not terrible, but I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. And it's funny how genes, that's just like going to a casino, man, because you see some of the hottest people that get together, and they have some of the ugliest freaking kids. And then you have 2 people that are mediocre that get together, and then they're popping out supermodels. And you're like, dude, this is crazy.
Well, I didn't win the genetic lottery, but I'm glad my parents played. Anyway. I'm glad they bought a ticket.
I'm glad they fooled around a little bit. So one of the other aspects I wanted to ask is, does the traveling get tiresome? 15 years. I'll bet you've put some mileage in hotels. How do you like the grind of that? And how does that compare to some of these artists because that's basically your version of going on tour, right?
It is. I do it differently than in most bands. When you would think of somebody going on tour for a month or 2, so I basically go on tour every weekend for 2 to 4 shows during the weekend. During the summer, it's usually 3 to 5 shows, and it's totally exhausting, but I love it. And in this last year, I've gone through a lot of emotional grief. I think I was telling you, I've gone through a divorce, and just gave up a lot of things that I valued in my life. And in those darkest days, when I go out on the road for a weekend and play with my family and my friends and be around the crowd and just let that music play, it just usually brings me back to a happier place. So I love it. It's still, I love performing, always have.
And we can totally edit this out if you don't want to talk about this, but did the music life have a negative effect on your relationship, or do you feel like that didn't play a major part in that?
It definitely played a part in that. In that we had we had pets at home, and so the road was just something I enjoyed, and I think as we grew, there were fewer things that we enjoyed together. So in hindsight, it would have been nice to have somebody there on the road with you to enjoy those. Not that I even wanted that when I was younger, but in hindsight, I could see that that's, if somebody's gone 3 or 4 days every week and then they're exhausted for a day when they come home, that doesn't allow you a whole lot of time with that person when they're emotionally got enough gas in the tank to be contributing much to a relationship. So I'm dating a gal now, and it's going really well, and she's able to come with me on the road on the weekends, and I'm enjoying that.
How much of your marriage were you already into your career? Like, were you doing this the whole time you were married?
So I've been doing this 14 years and been married 18 years.
Wow. So
I was full time within a few years of being married. I went full time.
But was she supportive in that?
She was very supportive.
So that was like,
yeah. So that was amazing. Just to have somebody that wasn't, she wasn't bitching because I was out playing, because I think she knew how important it was to me.
And I know we're kind of now putting the cart before the horse, but did you so what did you do full time before you got into music?
I did the job that I think everyone should do if they want to be self-employed at anything else. So I was working in a small prison, strip searching meth heads and supervising a small prison, which was kind of like going to work every day and picking out a scab, just you're working on this situation that is not really helping many people. It doesn't seem like anybody's getting better when you're in prison. So,
yeah. That's typically not a place you go to better yourself.
They're not really, and it should be, it could be, but it's not a rehabilitative place.
Right.
So that's what I did for I think 8 years, until January 1st, 2008.
But you were always musically inclined. Like when did you start being interested in music? How far back does that go?
When I was 10, I bought a harmonica at a service merchandise store for $10, and my parents that year bought me a drum set. So that would have been like on my 10th birthday. So that's when I was always fascinated with the harmonica. Like when I was a kid at grocery stores, they used to sell these little plastic things shaped like harmonicas that would play a few notes, but you really couldn't play them very musically. But I always wanted one of those, always had one of those. And just, I don't know what it was with harmonica and then drums. I was always, I grew up in Indiana, which is a basketball state, and you'd go watch the high school basketball team, and I was always leaning over the rail trying to watch the pep band so I could watch the drummer. So I started when I was 10, started playing some shows when I was 15.
Performing?
Mm-hmm.
And so were you in choir? Did you ever have vocal lessons? Like, when did you figure out you could sing? Because you got a damn good voice.
Thanks. Yeah, I was in band for, I think, until maybe my sophomore year. And then it was getting boring. It's playing symphonic band is, I feel bad for band teachers. That's why I never wanted to, I knew I wanted to play music growing up, but I never wanted to be a band teacher and try to teach 37th graders how to play 5 different instruments. So it was boring because they just can't give you enough attention, I think, to help you get better. So I approached a couple long-haired guys in my class that I knew played guitar and just said, hey, do you guys want to try to get in a band? And they were all for it, man. That just changed that conversation with a couple scary looking dudes with really long hair, just changed my whole projection in life.
And how did you get your first gig? What were you, 15? You said you started. What was your first gig, if you can remember?
Yeah, we played it was some girl in our class was having a party. And, so it wasn't like a paying gig, it was just
right.
But it was like, hey, we'll come over and play some music, So I think that was one of the first ones. And then I had a funny, almost first gig story right about that same time. I grew up in this little town in Indiana, a couple hundred people, and my neighbors, and it really felt like the Bible Belt. I mean, there was no bars in our town, and, so I never really saw live music in our town, and my neighbors were having this party, and I was probably 14 or 15, and they're bringing in big amps and guitars and stuff, and I just knew I needed to be there. And there was a little alley that separated my yard from them, and these guys were setting up and starting to play. And so I just got my harmonicas and I just walked back and forth like I was pacing up and down the alley. Like I was too shy to go over and say, hey, can I check this out? So I just kept playing harmonica within ear's distance of them. I mean, I had to just look pathetic. But sure enough, they invited me over. And that was this guy, Joe Linehan. I went to school with his daughter, but he was at this party and he told me which harmonicas to use for which song, because harmonicas are tuned in a way that you have to know which one you're playing with whatever song. So he showed me which one to use, and I got up and played with his band, and it went pretty well because I could bend the notes and stuff. I just didn't know which one to use to play whatever scale or whatever. So that went really well. And then the lady that owned the house, it was her party, Brenda, she said, hey, there's a party in 2 weeks from now out in the country, kind of by Sleepy Hollow. We can't invite you to it because it's not our party, but you should go there and try to get in. So I think I had my driver's permit, but I just took a car by myself and driving down the country out by Sleepy Hollow, and I see these long driveway full of cars, and I roll down my window and I could hear the music. So I just parked on the road and I go up, and it's like 1,000-foot driveway at least, and there's these huge guys standing there, and they said, who are you? And I said, I'm with the band. I held up my harmonicas. And they let me go in. I go in, and there's Indianapolis Colts cheerleaders serving drinks.
Oh my gosh.
And it was a party for Jim Irsay, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts. And so that was one of the first gigs, and that wasn't really a gig, but I went there, and these guys let me play with them. And they were like monster musicians. I mean, some of them are like in the Chicago Blues Hall of Fame. And I learned a lot that day because I'd start playing and I didn't know any of the etiquette of playing. And this guy, Rick Knapp, it was his name. He was a bass player with Carrie Bell, famous guy in the blues realm. His stepson became one of my best friends, and we still play on occasion. But I remember I started playing, and then somebody was singing, and he's like, hey, if that guy's singing, you don't fucking play. if I'm playing a solo, you don't fucking play. And it was like, and I learned a ton just having somebody that I knew had clout tell me what not to do. And so that really helped me musically. I think I was pretty courageous when I was young. I would just think I could get on any stage by asking. And
dude, that is freaking awesome.
So I wouldn't do that now, but I kind of wish I had a little more of that still. It's like, wow, that youthful
spark,
ignorance. I don't know. Boldness.
All right. And so now we're fast forwarding. So how did it come about that you were like, man, I'm going to take this gamble on myself, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to get gigs, and I'm going to just do this?
Like full time, you mean?
Yeah. Like, how did you decide to make, because that's a pretty scary thing to.
It was scary, but it wasn't terrifying in the fact that I was already playing 2 or 3 shows a week as I was working full time.
Okay, so you'd already built basically.
I'd already built it, and I was just able to step out into it. I really don't have regrets like that, but I wish, looking back, I realized I could have done that 2 or 3 years earlier.
Right.
Because it was already going pretty well, and I could have just done that. But
that is so cool. And you obviously have that. See, that would be my biggest fear is having a place to go and play. And meeting you has been interesting because, when you think of people making it in the music industry, it's the people that you see on TV and, the Grand Ole Opry and all that bull crap. And there is you've opened my eyes to that whole genre of people that don't necessarily aren't ever seen in public, but still full time go out and make a living performing music. There
are so many ways to make it, in quotes. And you're right, that means something to people. Just to have that assumption that you're trying to make it and you're trying to be a big star. And for most musicians that are making a living, that's not what their intentions are.
They just want to do their craft.
Yeah, and there's so many people that do it. So I have some friends that are full-time musicians, like more than I would expect, just in the Midwest area, and we've all done it radically different ways. Some guys play in church and are like they might have a church that they're the music supervisor for, music leader for, and they'll play coffee shops and wineries and stuff on the side. I've just seen people do it several different ways. So I always tell people, when they're young and aspiring to do whatever, I think Henry Ford had a quote, all it takes is an idea whose time has come, and run with it. So you just have to find your own creative way of doing whatever it is I think you want to do, and just figure out what you want to do, and then figure out a creative way that not a lot of other people are doing, or maybe you're the only person doing it quite that way, and that makes it easier to sell.
Man, that is freaking crazy. So if people listening to this want to look you up and see what's going on, how do they go about doing that?
It's the Riley County Jail,
inmate number 3553.
No, I have a website, ShawnCole.net, and another one, drunkmonkeyband.com. And so you could email me through either of those websites.
That is freaking sweet. And how many albums do you have?
I have 4 solo albums out. I think 2 or 3 are still available online.
What was your latest?
Yeah, it's been a while. It was called Busted Up.
Busted Up.
So I'm working on a new one now with the guys that I used to play with 25 plus years ago in the country band that almost ran off the road because somebody loosened our lug nuts. So I've reconnected with a couple of those guys, Kenny Jones and Jerry Baker, and enjoying to see where that it's different for me because I've just been so committed to playing the gigs, and this is kind of getting me back to writing songs. So I don't know if anything will come of it, but I'm having fun doing it.
And I have to ask, but I mean, you're a good-looking guy. I'm not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying. You have a lot of. You were married basically the whole time through this thing. Did you have a lot of chicks hitting on you? Have you ran into a lot of that?
There's a lot of flirtation from me and from people in the audience.
Sure.
But the fact is, when you're a musician, oftentimes, especially when you're in a one-man band show, the bar is open till usually 1 a.m. And I'm playing till 1 a.m. And by 1:15, everybody in there is gone except me and the bar staff. And I'm there till 2 in the morning. So there wasn't much of that. That's
too bad. I was hoping I could get some I have to beat the girls off with a stick. It was really difficult.
I never had much.
You didn't trash a hotel room. You weren't like,
I'm
in the big leagues now.
Nothing like that. If you saw most of the hotel rooms I stay in, you'd realize I'm a long ways from the big leagues.
Before you leave Kurt's, go down with the baseball bat. just trash that place. Make your statement.
This has been a lot of fun.
No, dude, you're awesome. I really appreciate you coming down. You're a really good friend, and it's going to be a conversation that will resonate. And I hope that there's many, many more. So you're going to have to come back on, especially when we actually start getting listeners.
Well, good luck with the podcast. So, yeah, I'm happy to be here just having a conversation with you, as I always am.
Was it hard? Did COVID really... Did that really affect you? I mean, I imagine with everything at some point being closed down, that was a...
Yeah, it hit pretty hard. I remember I played on March 16th, and it was a good size show, but everyone there was like, oh, I don't think we're going to be able to do this much longer. And then I played a St. Patty's Day show the year when it hit, 2020, and the cops got called in because the bar had a few more people in it than we were supposed to. And the cop I remember him going around counting people, and he said, well, I can't do anything, but you're all crazy. You're probably all going to die. And boom, that was the last show for 3 months. So everything dried up. And I came from a blue collar family that you just work. I mean, you got to keep the bills. Yeah. So luckily for me, I started a company right away called Musicians on Deck, because I had part of it for me too. I had these musicians that I was booking the majority of their shows for them. So suddenly these young people that are no longer have any income coming in are looking at me and what do we do now? And so I felt somewhat responsible. At least I wanted to help them. So I had 5 or 6 people working under me, all musicians, and we'd go out and stain decks, and we got good at it. But man, we did a sloppy ass job on a couple people's decks. Like I feel guilty because there was a couple decks where it's like, man, we used the wrong product and just didn't do as good as professionals probably should have done. But then we got pretty good at it, and we stained a lot of decks that sucked. It's people that do manual labor every day.
Oh man,
it was crippling, laying on your back on rocks trying to paint under a deck or something. That's tough work, but it got us through.
I laid tile for a while with my uncle has a business, and man, it is backbreaking work. Any of that hard labor. I mean, it's awesome to learn that stuff because it's, like you said, you run into a tight spot. It's nice to fall back into a trade that that you can still do something useful, but it's a lot more fun playing a guitar than it is hanging sheetrock.
Exactly.
It's a lot more satisfaction.
I try not to take it for granted because I realize everything changes. I don't know how long this run will last, but I'm just going to do it as long as I can. And
what is your hope for the future? Where do you see yourself in like 5 years?
Yeah, I'd like to keep playing in the Midwest, similar to how I'm playing now, for the next 10 years. That's my hope.
It's freaking awesome.
We'll see. You never know what life's going to deal you, but.
Well, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, man, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And for anyone still listening, thank you so much. You're listening to the Just Josh and You podcast. Check us out. By the time you're hearing this, we should be on Spotify. Hopefully everything works out good with them. They have a little vetting process you have to go through before they'll take you out. But the SS feed will be linked underneath this podcast, and then please like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified when new episodes come out, so you can hear more awesome people like Shawn. And you're going to come back in studio anyway, because Bongo Charlie, who I've met, we got to get him in here.
Yeah.
That would be a fun.
You got to try to capture some of that.
Oh man, live. And you got to bring in some sound bites from your jam session, man, because that is just hilarious.
Sounds like
we won't tell him. We'll get him in here and we'll be like, hey, we want you to listen to this guy and tell us what you think and see what he says.
That would be entertaining for you, me, and whoever listens. But thank you so much, Josh. Had a great time.
You're awesome, brother. Shawn Cole, ladies and gentlemen, and we will catch you on the flip side.